Hey everyone, Chaps here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a tool that I got over Black Friday. This is the Dewalt DW735. This is actually the 735X. It comes with a couple of spare parts. And I got it in a kit that also came with the DW735, which is a stand to put it on. So I've recently said that I wasn't really going to invest in a planer yet, but I was looking back at some of the projects that I've done in the past and some of the stuff that I've got coming up this next year, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and invest in a planer. Later in the video, I'll discuss why I went with this particular model and why I wanted to get the one with the stand. But for now, let's get this thing open, take a look, and run some test parts through. Alrighty, we're going to start with the big one, the planer. This thing weighs about 100 pounds. These are some spare saw blades that it comes with. It's not standard on the DW735, but on the 735X, it does come with these saw blades. And I'm guessing that these are the in-feed and out-feed tables that it comes with as well. Alrighty, and like I said, this thing weighs about 100 pounds, and it smells like a brand new car. It's very nice. Alright. So let's get some of the rest of this assembled. All right, so I'm not going to bother putting the in-feed and out-feed tables on yet. I'm going to wait until I get this on the stand. So next, let's go ahead and move over and put together this stand. The planer itself weighs 100 pounds, and if I plan to use it a decent amount, this stand is really going to come in handy. I could have just built one, but I think the Black Friday deal made it more than worth it. I didn't bother recording this assembly, I just snapped a few progress shots. It took a while to get together, and I wanted to take my time and make sure that it was done properly. Oh, and I took a nice lunch break in there. Alright, so here's the final assembled planer and stand. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features here. So we're going to start down here at the bottom of the stand. We have these two wheels on either side, plus a central caster on the other side. This caster, along with those other two wheels, makes it so the table can slide around, pivot back and forth. We've also got these little leveling feet here, so that when I drop the caster, now it's sitting on those feet and it will stay nice and level. I showed you before that this has an in-feed and an out-feed table. I didn't show myself assembling them. It's really easy though. It just sort of snaps onto this pin right here. And then you take these four little Allen bolts, two on each side for the in-feed and two on each side for the out-feed. You loosen them up and you adjust this table up and down until it's level. You want it to be very level going across here. I'll hit on that more later. But this table, when you want to store it, it folds up nicely and it just stays right there. Same with the out-feed table. It's right here, folds up, and unfortunately hits this blower. The blower is removable, or I guess not the blower, but the blower port attachment, that's removable, so this thing will stay up. It's kind of a unfortunate design flaw of this. So speaking of the blower port, this thing is very powerful. On a lot of planers, it has sort of a passive port that you need to hook a shop vac up to. This one, we'll show it later, there's an internal blower fan that actually pushes the air out, and it pushes it pretty hard and gets rid of the chips pretty well. So I mentioned that we'll be opening it later. In the meantime, here's this tool. It stores nicely up in there. It's just a star head wrench that can be used to open up these screws to get on the inside. It's also got some magnets, which we'll hit on again later. So coming around to the other side here, we've got this handle. This is how we change the depth, how much material we're taking off. Each rotation on here is a 1/16 of an inch. So you can actually get some pretty fine accuracy with that. Here is a gauge, which I still need to tune, but this shows us the thickness of our final planed board. And over here, we have a hard stop. So if I don't want to pay attention to this thing and set it to 1 inch, I can come over here, set this to 1 inch, crank down on the handle, and when it gets to 1 inch, it will stop automatically. And that's something that we just tune by adjusting this here. I assume it's correct out of the box, but yeah, we've got a few different hard stop options here. The last thing to figure out how much you're taking off is this material removal gauge. So down on the underside here, we have this little thing that the wood will hit when it goes in. And what that does, if I press on it here, you see it lifts this up. It tells you for a recommended width of board, how much it at max should be taking off. So for a 3-inch board, we could take off 1/8 of an inch at a time. So this is a nice quick way to see how much material it's taking off. Over to the side, this is our speed indicator. So you can see right now it's set to 1. I switch it over, now it's on 2. This changes the number of cuts per inch. On 1, it's 179, and on 2, it's 96. So what that's gonna do is change the roller speed. It doesn't change the speed of the actual blade that's spinning, it changes the rollers which are pulling the wood through. And on that 1 setting, the rollers are moving a little bit slower. So each time the blade passes over a part of the wood, it's taking off less material. It makes for a smoother finish. I'll show that a bit more later. And not only is it making for a smoother finish, but it should actually let the blades last a bit longer. And it's actually a recommended thing to just leave it on 1. I don't think it's actually that much slower at feeding stuff through. So I'm probably just gonna leave it at 1 at all times. And last but not least, we've got the power button, or power lever, I guess. Don't worry, it's not plugged in right now. This would not be safe to do if it was plugged in. But yeah, so power on, power off. Now I'm gonna set up the camera here and let's take a look at the inside of this. Alrighty, so let's take a look down in here. So I mentioned earlier that we have the blower. So right down here is where all the chips get sucked up from the blades and pushed into the blower, and they shoot right out the back. Now, give me 1 second here, and I'm gonna loosen this thing up, and we'll take a look at the blades. Alrighty, and there we go. We have a nice view of the blades down there. So, I'm gonna use this thing to point here. So, this is one of the blades, and you can see all of these little bolts holding a blade in place. This tool is actually what you would use to remove it. And these blades are double-sided, which is nice, and there's 3 of them going around there. You would press this little button over to the side in order to allow you to spin it freely. But the double-sided nature of these means that you can take the blade out, flip it around, put it back in, and it would work just fine. You can also take the blade and push it over to the right or the left slightly in case you have a nick in the same spot on all 3 blades. That would allow it so that the nick is in a separate spot, so in theory your wood should have a nice clean cut. So the other thing I'll mention is the back of this tool has a magnet. I put it down there and it sticks. It's a pretty strong magnet, and that's for blade removal. If you want to remove the blade, you unscrew all of these things, stick that down on there, pull it up, and you're good to go. It just makes it so that you don't have to use your hands and risk cutting yourself, which is a pretty nice feature. Alrighty, I'm going to put this back together, and then we'll take a look at cutting some wood. A planer is a tool that serves 2 primary functions. The first one is that it planes the top of the board in order to make it parallel to the bottom side of the board. It doesn't make it flat, it just planes it so it's parallel. So if the bottom of the board is warped, then the top of the board is going to come out warped as well. It makes parallel surfaces by trimming a small amount of material off the top of the board, which I guess is the other primary function. It can be used to take off a set amount of material from the top of the board in order to make the board a certain thickness, hence the name, a thickness planer. It can also serve some other purposes if you make some homemade jigs, such as functioning as a makeshift jointer. Contrary to a planer's base function, a jointer will make a surface flat and straight, and it will even allow you to ensure that all 4 sides are perpendicular for that perfect board. A benchtop jointer is actually one of the next larger tools that I'm interested in, but I have no plans to get one anytime soon. They're expensive, and this thing can handle most of my jointing needs. In order to do that though, I need some custom jointing jigs for my planer. They're pretty easy to make, and I'll be making some soon. I'll record that process and make some videos, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss those when they come out. The basics of the inside of a planer are 2 feed rollers and a cutter. The rollers apply pressure to the board and pull the board through. The cutter obviously cuts the board. The DW735 has 3 blades, which is fairly common in benchtop planers. Some cheaper ones only have 2 blades, and more expensive ones or upgraded planers have Helix heads. Basically, it's a spiral pattern that produces a more consistent result, lasts longer, and is quieter. It's expensive though, so I don't plan on upgrading at this point. I mentioned earlier that this planer has 2 speeds. Blade actually stays at a constant 10,000 RPM. The rollers are actually what change speed in order to change the feed speed. The slower it feeds, the more cuts you get per inch. The more cuts per inch, the less material each cut needs to take off. In turn, you get a smoother result. I also want to mention planer snipe, which is a concern with most planers. Snipe is when the blades dig into the material and leave a groove or a mark. One reason for this could be the carriage moving. As I said previously, the rollers apply a lot of pressure. Because of this, it's possible for this to cause the body to move slightly when the wood is fed in. It's obviously exaggerated in this animation, but you get the idea. The other, and probably more common manner in which we get snipe is due to the material rocking when it's only touching one roller. Imagine that we're feeding this board in. If the board isn't perfectly level, the first roller may act as a pivot, causing the front to lift up. And honestly, the rotation direction of the roller certainly doesn't help with this. Then the board gets further in, and it will be pushed down to ensure that it's level. Then, again, as the board's leaving the planer, it has the opportunity to rock, thus lifting the back of the board into the cutter head and causing a bit more snipe. To fix this, one option is just to slightly lift the back end of the board when feeding it in, and then to lift the front of the board when it's feeding out. Alternatively, you could ensure that there's 2 rollers before the cutter and 2 rollers after the cutter, but that would make it bulky and more expensive. But what does that really accomplish? Well, basically it forces the board to be level, and the other way we could do that is just to extend the infeed and outfeed table size to completely support the board. You actually see this on a lot of industrial planers, but for these smaller benchtop ones, that's where these foldable tables come into play. It's not as effective as a full table, but it's a nice compromise between price, size, and effectiveness. No matter what you do to fix snipe though, the thing you should always do is to reduce the amount of material being cut off on the final pass or two. By reducing the amount of material, you're reducing the pressure exerted by the rollers, and this is going to minimize the negative effects and lead to better results. So enough talking about it, let's run through some more test boards. I'm narrating this part now because, wow, this thing is loud. Like, even with ear protection, it is crazy loud. The blower on this is surprisingly strong. For dust collection, all I have right now is the shop vac. This is going to go through a lot of material though, so I'm going to need to figure something out here. I may actually have a pretty nice solution though, so stay tuned, and hopefully I'll have something out about that soon. So far, everything I've run through has been on speed 2, the faster speed. Now let's see what speed 1 looks like. Here's a side-by-side comparison. As you can see, 2 is certainly faster, but unless I'm doing a large amount of really long boards, that extra time is only going to be minimal, so I'm probably just going to stick with speed 1. Like I said before, it's a better finish, and it's less aggressive on the cutter blades. Before wrapping up, one question I wanted to hit on was, why this model? Why did I get this planer? There's so many options out there. Well, at first, I was looking at a $350 Ryobi, but that thing's around 8,000 RPM with only 2 blades. It's not going to get as high quality of a cut as this. I may not need that high quality of a cut, but I would like it. So then I started moving on to looking at the Dewalt 734, the step below this, or the rigid 4331. Which is very similar to the Dewalt that's the 734. But reading online and talking to coworkers, basically everything I read said, you don't regret this purchase of the 735. There's some people who are fine with their 734, but a lot of people are opting to upgrade from the 734 to the 735. I'm young, and I have plenty of time ahead of me to use these tools. I plan on having this last a long time, so putting in a little bit of extra money up front to make the rest of my life have a better quality product? Yeah, I'm all for that. Like I said, I've only got a few projects lined up right now. There's a few things I want to do next year. But in talking to people on Reddit and other forums, a common piece of feedback that I've gotten is that you may only plan to have the planer for a few projects and you might use it here or there, but once you have a planer, you're going to want to use it for everything. So I plan on using this a lot next year, apparently. So in that mindset, I've only run a few test boards through there. I can't really give a solid review yet, but a year from now, I should be able to. Make sure you subscribe so you can check back in about a year, and I'll give a review a year down the line with what I think of it at that point. So if you found this helpful, or if you just enjoyed this content, please consider dropping it a like. If you have any questions about any of the tools here, anything in my shop really, feel free to ask me on Twitter or drop a question down below. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will catch you next time.